Okay, welcome to the Gita in Action podcast. My name's Radha, and I'm here with a group of seekers, and we are reading through the Bhagavad Gita, talking about its relevance to our lives, and just trying to understand it better, get more acquainted with it, so that we can see our lives through the lens of the Gita, and that will make it so much better. I know it already has for me. And probably for a lot of you too here that are listening. So, chapter 3 is called Karma Yoga, the yoga of detached action. And we're coming up to the end here. We're coming up to the last section of chapter 3. Arjuna's going to ask a question. That's going to be our first text today. And then the rest of the section, there's like 7 verses or so left. It's going to be Krishna answering the question. And this is a pretty good part. I mean, I say that to all of it because all of it is just so relatable, I feel like. But this is another really relatable section. So it will be fun to talk about with you all. So let's get right into it. Chapter 3, text 36. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vishnu, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? So this section is really talking about self-sabotage here. You know, we all have this tendency towards self-sabotage. And the rest of text 37 through 43, the rest of the chapter, Krishna is going to answer this question. Arjuna is asking this question because if we remember in the previous verses, Krishna stated that even if we're doing something that we like even if we're situated in our natural inclination, if we're really aligned with our dharma, even within that natural place, there will be pockets of discomfort. You know, we might have to do things that don't give us so much pleasure. Like Arjuna's a warrior and he has to fight against his family. Like that doesn't give him really any pleasure, but that's his duty, that's his dharma. And also outside of what is natural, you know, there might be something that is likable for us. So this is why Arjuna is asking this question. There is something in us that pulls us towards something that is not good for us. There's something in us that makes it hard just to stick to our duty. And why does this happen? This is the question. We may want to go on the path of dharma, of virtue, of righteousness, but there's something that seems to pull us in the other direction, right? Something that unwillingly pulls us in the other direction, like forcing us towards self-defeating actions. And this is especially evident among addictions or overpowering cravings. I talked about my gym addiction in the last class, about going to the gym and saying, okay, I'm going to go moderate, I'm going to do moderate things, and then going so hard that over time I start to injure myself, and recognizing that and saying, no, I need to scale back. But every time going in and saying, okay, I'm going to scale back this time, I'm going to scale back. And then by the end of the session, it's like I'm doing the same thing over and over and I can't get out of it. So, you know what I did this time for, I'm trying to like work out again after postpartum. And I got this like exercise program for postpartum moms. And it's like so boring, but I'm just like trying to stick to it and not like try to be too much over the top and get into the same pattern that I have, and harm myself, because that's what I'll literally do. I'll harm myself. Even though I know I will, I'll do it anyway. So I'm trying to like create boundaries by saying, okay, this is the program I'm going to do, and this is all that there is. And so far I'm sticking to it so far. So that's what happens. We get pulled by these impulses. We have these inner conflicts and we get pulled by these impulses. And this is a universal human experience. So if you think that it's just you that struggles, it's everybody. This is just, again, a part of this human vehicle. We all have some kind of inner struggle. It might not be something so outwardly obvious like a drug addiction, but we all have these inner struggles. We all have these impulses that we're pulled to go in directions that we know we don't really want to. Maybe it's just sitting on the couch and eating an entire, bag of chocolate gummy bears, but whatever it is, we all have these. We know we don't want to, but we do it anyway. Procrastination is another example. You know that you should work on an important task, but distractions pull you away. Unhealthy habits like overeating, overspending, indulging in negative behaviors. This often happens when emotional impulses override reason. Again, like we know, if we were in our clear-headed, highest self state, we wouldn't choose some of these behaviors. But we get emotional and we get pulled in different directions, and we end up kind of acting in a way, or shopping, having a whole 2 hour splurge of spending on Amazon, like just because. So we have to recognize, we should recognize that the external circumstances are not what's forcing these actions, right? They can maybe trigger some things, but it's really the internal desires and attachments that create pressure to act in ways that don't align with our higher purpose, right? The internal desires and our attachments create pressure to act in ways that don't align with our higher purpose. That's what's actually happening here. We tend to like to kind of blame it on something outside of us, and it's sometimes it's kind of easier to do that. But what we should really understand is that we have these internal desires, we have these internal attachments, and that's what's pulling us away from staying, aligned to our intention. So you have to know what is right, but we feel driven to act otherwise due to these strong internal urges. So we have to work to understand these conflicts, ask ourselves why sometimes we act against our values and goals, right? Identify patterns and triggers. And this is what will be unique to our human vehicle. We all have unique triggers, patterns, things that pull us, based off of our impressions, our experiences, our conditioning. We call it our conditioning, but the things that we've experienced up to this point. If we've experienced things that in our, childhood, ways that we soothed or we coped with certain things, we may see ourselves doing that in our adulthood and recognize that, hey, this actually isn't really serving me anymore. I know that's probably happened for a lot of us, if not all of us, right? Some of the things that behaviors or ways of dealing with things that we developed in our childhood when we didn't have as much knowledge, we didn't have as much access, we didn't have as many skills, right? Where we see, oh, these don't really serve me anymore. And so we have to get kind of reflective and honest about those things. So this is the opening question, right? Why is one impelled to sinful actions, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? So 37 is our next text. And we're gonna dive really deep into that. Does anybody want to share anything before I move on? Okay, let's dive into 37. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "It is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world." Okay, so lust is what he's saying here. Lust, oftentimes we associate lust with like a sexual desire. The way it's used in this context, it's the definition is much more expansive. It's more like referring to any overpowering desire that eventually becomes self-destructive. So any overpowering desire that eventually becomes self-destructive, he's saying here, is when it comes in contact with the mode of passion. We talked about the three modes in the last several classes, right? It's later transformed into wrath, like just anger. And then this is the all-devouring enemy of the world, right? It will just consume you. That's kind of the process of self-destruction here. And this is what happens. We get overly attached to something. We have a strong desire in our mind. This is what I want. This is my plan for the day. That's a trap that I fall into pretty easily. And then when this doesn't happen, when things come up in our way and we can't, and things don't go according to the way that we want, again, for me, it's my plan. I'm angry about it. It's frustrating. Both of these things stem from attachment and create a restlessness in the mind. So that what we need to do about it, every desire needs to have some kind of boundaries, right? Like if you like food, eat in moderation. If you like shopping, buy in moderation. But when the desire becomes so powerful that all there is afterwards is the rage against boundaries when we can't have it. You know, if our desires are just so strong and we don't have any of these boundaries, we become so angry when we can't fulfill it, right? And so after the rage against boundaries, there's the rejection of boundaries. So, you know, if we've said, okay, I'm only going to eat this much tonight, and then we end up, you know, just eating so much that we're like, you know, I've already ate so much, I'm just going to keep eating. I've already gone past that boundary. I'm just going to keep going because who cares, right? And this is when things become very destructive, right? Things become devouring, which is like consuming. It just is like a wildfire. Or sinful, using the word sinful here, it just means like wrong. Like it's against what our higher calling, what we feel is our higher calling. It's just wrong. So we all have this tendency to indulge, but when it goes beyond the boundaries, it can be highly destructive. This is the purpose of boundaries, again, to protect us, not restrict us, but to protect us. And Krishna says it becomes sinful and devouring. Again, sinful in the moral sense, that it's just not aligned with our higher values and aspirations, and devouring is in a more practical sense that it just consumes our mind, ourselves. It's almost like we're powerless against it, like alcoholism, for example. You know, it can destroy income, dignity, relationships, livelihood, humanity, spirituality. It's just like it just consumes every, you know, what could be positive aspect of a person's life in a completely negative direction. So these impressions are inside us that prompt us towards certain actions. Again, impressions just mean our past experiences that we now take, we kind of like apply to our present moment. So we've eaten some delicious food in the past and we want to eat it again, right? Our past impressions. And we're carrying impressions, remember, not just from this life, but our past lives. So we come into this world with impressions, some that we're not even aware of, you know, that affect greatly our conditioning and our decisions. And so we have these inner impressions of pleasure and trouble, right? If we remember a hangover, we might be more likely to stay within the boundaries. But if we remember the high from when we drank, we may want to drink again. Because at the basic level, we're all pleasure seekers. And wherever we believe that there's pleasure available, we're going to seek it because we believe that it's our right to be happy. And it is our right to be happy. But the problem is that we get kind of confused with what's actually going to bring us lasting happiness. And we get kind of lost in it. And then it takes control of us. Right. So this need for pleasure, this need for happiness has to be directed towards the right way to be happy. Right. We need to refine and direct our desires towards constructive and spiritual goals. Right? So maybe like transform the desire for material success into a drive for service or knowledge or personal growth. However, our impressions, our past experience within us, they'll often prompt us towards indulging in things that are unhealthy and again don't really lead us to happiness. So we need to recognize that these emotions are temporary and arise from material influences, not our true self. And if our environment's filled with passion, we put ourselves in an inflammable situation where we just need one spark to light a huge fire, right? If we're already feeling bored or frustrated or let down, you know, the wood is like super, super dry. And then some enjoyment comes around, some potential opportunity to enjoy in the moment. And the whole thing just goes up in flames, right? So if everybody's feasting and drinking and we put ourselves in that environment, some small spark can blaze into a huge fire. It's like anybody ever like gone out to a bar when you're feeling bad, you know, when you're just like not feeling good. You're like, I'm just going to go to a bar. This will make me feel better. And then you wake up the next morning, you're like, I really don't feel better. I'm not going to lie. I haven't done that a lot because I never really got into drinking, but I think that's pretty normal. And I got into other things, but not drinking for whatever reason. So this is a desire that rages against boundaries. We also need to learn to see desire and anger as a cycle. So sometimes we get kind of short-sighted in the moment. We just want to enjoy whatever's going to, you know, give us this temporary pleasure. We have to understand that when we have these huge desires and they become unfulfilled, they lead to frustration, which turns into anger. And so if the more desires that we have, the more lofty desires, the more we kind of set ourselves up for this cycle of frustration and anger. And this is why we practice gratitude a lot. We practice contentment and gratitude for what we have, because we see how that just fills us up with like a feeling of like warmth and love, right? When we practice, thinking about what we're grateful for, it kind of does the opposite, right? Whereas when we kind of meditate on what we don't have and what we need, and what we end up becoming is just like frustrated. So this is the whole purpose of gratitude, or one of the purposes. There's several purposes, but this is something that it does for us. And if we have this level of, if we have desires and we notice that we're becoming angry, we have to learn to control this anger before it controls us, because it clouds our judgment. It leads to rash decisions. And we have to practice patience and self-restraint when faced with these triggers. Things to help us do this, like breathing, pausing before reacting, creating that space between stimulus and response, so powerful. And just reflecting on the situation, these kind of sattvic activities, right? We're going to see more and more how the mode of sattva helps keep us elevated, right? Because this desire is right in the mode of rajas, right in the mode of passion. We have these endless desires. And if we're not practicing these sattvic practices, these things like deep breathing, reflecting, contentment, gratitude, if we're not practicing these things, then the mode of ignorance is going to pull us down. And that's where we get angry and frustrated. And maybe we act out some of those frustrations either through bad decisions for ourselves or resentments with other people. And so this is why these modes, it's so important to identify where your behavior is and to try to upgrade it a little bit, because we want to try to get out of this mode of ignorance, because it will pull us down and it will consume us if we let ourselves get there. So when we have relationships, when we have expectations of others aren't met, we'll often get frustrated, and that'll lead to anger. So instead of reacting impulsively, we learn things like to communicate openly and calmly about our needs. And we learn, to pick partners that care about our needs, and to try to compromise and meet people halfway. And we learn all these relationship skills so that we can kind of live in harmony with ourselves and with the other person. And this keeps us, again, from getting consumed in that fire of ignorance. Ignorance meaning the mode of ignorance. And work. So at work, if setbacks occur, or we don't let our unfulfilled desires create anger, right? Or discouragement, we don't get discouraged. We reflect, a setback occurs, something happens that maybe we wouldn't have chosen, but we reflect on what we could learn from it, right? And we maybe use it to adjust our approach. And in that way, we grow. And that's a much more constructive way of dealing with it than letting ourselves just fester in anger. We see it as an opportunity. Okay, what can I learn from this? How can I adjust so that this doesn't happen in the future in a much worse way? And that's kind of our mindset around it. Even our spiritual practice can get frustrating, right? We have this desire for quick results or distractions. We want to do all these things for our spiritual practice in a day, and then we get caught up by all these other things and we're frustrated. Or we see how far we have to come, right? Maybe we behave in a way that's like, wow, I'm so far from where I wanted to be. I know that happens to me, right? It's like the gold standard in spiritual life is so high that it's like, wow, I'm never going to get there, right? But instead, we stay focused on consistent effort rather than immediate outcomes. And we just accept, we just focus on the process, not the end outcome, and we just keep going, right? And the other thing here is never losing faith in our potential to improve, right? So it's like if a patient loses faith in a treatment, they'll become sicker and suffer more. I remember when I first came into spiritual life, I really liked chanting, but sometimes if I felt like my consciousness was just like dirty to say, like if I just got off work and I was just like super in my ego, I felt like I'm going to wait to chant. I just don't feel very like connected right now. And I remember asking my teacher at the time that, like, what if, sometimes I just don't feel like it's a good place. It's a good time for me to chant. He's like, do you think you're too sick to take the medicine? He's like, never think you're too sick to take the medicine. And that should be our mindset. If we start to get hard on ourselves about where we are, where we aren't, or that also is like fuel to the fire. That also should be like a red flag as we're driving our vehicle. Don't go there. You know, road closed, turn around, because that's not good thinking. That's just not good thinking. You're never too sick to take the medicine. And this applies also to our moral and spiritual health. You're never too sick to take the medicine. Because when we're morally and spiritually sick, we can hurt others and hurt ourselves. Right? So we try to improve ourselves and we repeatedly fail. We may just decide, this is just the way that I am. I just have this really strong addiction and I'm just never going to get over it. This is just who I am. Right? But if we decide that, the inner forces, they won't just stay static, right? They won't just static. Is that the word? Like they won't just stay still. The inner forces, or this inner enemy of lust, it will just continue eating away, right? It'll increase its attack and it will draw us down further. Right? It's like once it starts, we have to identify it and correct. We can't just say, "Oh, I'm just going to stay here." No, it'll drag us down, and we have to understand that. And then at this point, we may give in to it and stop fighting and maybe even become resentful of other people who trigger our insecurities. And so we're like not only like pulling ourselves down, but we're kind of like pulling down anybody who comes into our wake, right? Like a tsunami. So we have to understand that this neutral ground doesn't exist. We can't just say, okay, I'm just going to accept that I'm a shopaholic, or I'm just going to accept that, I have a problem with food. Like it's good, accept that. But at the same time, continue to work on it and know that you're never too sick to make progress. And the biggest thing is know that this isn't intrinsic to who you are, right? We're pure souls. We're part and parcel of source, right? Whatever behavior is going on, whatever external addiction that you have, whatever impulse is pulling you in a direction that doesn't align with your higher dharma, it's not you. It's not you. Your true identity is spirit, right? Your true identity is your soul. And this outer material covering we have to deal with because it greatly impacts our soul. But it isn't you. It isn't you. It isn't your identity. And there's always hope, right? Because of that, there's always hope. And we can improve, we can learn, we can grow. And it may be very slow, incremental progress, but we can do it, right? If we get the right help, the right support, the right plan, right? A postpartum exercise plan that's like has no options for really intense workouts that are gonna, wreck my pelvic floor muscles that I would do if I was left to my own devices. But we have to kind of figure this out for ourselves and try to create some boundaries around these things in our life so that we can make incremental progress and understand that this isn't something that makes you weak. This isn't something, this is universal for all of us. We all have these impulses, these pulls, because we're in this material existence and we've acquired all these past impressions. They're going to come up and we just have to learn how to deal with them and navigate them and confront them so that we can make incremental progress so that they don't pull us down. Because if we are not doing that, they will eventually just get bigger and bigger and bigger until we have to do something about it. Right. And maybe not in this life, but in maybe a future life, but likely in this life, you'll be confronted to some of these impulses that say, wow, okay, I have to make a change. And hopefully at that point, it won't be too late, So know that this impurity exists in all of us, right? We all have to be open to finding it and identifying it and also fighting it. There's no way out of it. That's the only way out of it. We have to find it. We have to identify it. We have to fight it. That's it. Or it will just keep growing. It doesn't just like go away, and it doesn't just like stay the same. We can't just say, okay, I'm going to be content. No, it will kind of devour us. Right? We have to, and a way we could do this is to train ourselves to see this inner fight as like stimulating and rewarding. Right? Like identify that whatever impulse is coming up, it's not you. It's kind of like an internal enemy In the same way that, like, if you're on a battlefield, there's an external enemy, and a warrior will get all like, adrenaline and like he's ready to fight it. That's the way we should see these internal enemies that pop up, that present like vulnerabilities to our path. And we could be that way. We can be it can be kind of like stimulating and rewarding. Like, okay, I know I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to face this struggle with what I'm going to eat for breakfast. And instead of doing this, and this, that ends up pulling my day in completely wrong direction, I'm going to do this, and this. Right? Just fight it head on as if it were an external enemy. Understanding that it's really just an internal enemy. And again, it's not you. It's part of this vehicle, and we have to learn to identify it and deal with it properly. And the other thing is to see people that are addicted, that have been really pulled down into this mode of ignorance, that have kind of been beat by this process, right? Been beat by this fight. We don't want to see them as demented or degraded, like crazy or just really low, right? But we should see them as like tormented. I know in AA they call, and maybe other places too, I'm sure they call it like alcoholism a disease. And even having even that word, like it's a disease, it creates that separation that it's not you, it's this disease. And this is what it is. It's like something's happening to you. You're being tormented, and you don't have the skills or the connection to properly fight it. So when we see these people, like an alcoholic, we don't want to think like only an insane person would choose alcohol over family, work, health, life, right? Like that's an obvious, like that might be obvious thing that we think, but we should kind of work on changing the framework of that, right? We don't want to see like only someone degraded would ignore their values and hurt other people to fuel a temporary pleasure, right? Because that's not actually what's happening. It's not by choice. It's like they're getting pulled down, they're getting defeated by this internal enemy. In the same way that if you're at war, you get beat by an external enemy. And this causes us to look down on them and put labels on them, which is also not helpful, right? Because despite their demented and degraded behavior, their inner reality is that they're tormented by these desires. And they just keep goading them towards this indulgence that they're tormented by. They certainly don't want to lose their family and relationships and entire livelihood, right? That's not like a conscious decision. They're so far in the mode of ignorance that they're completely controlled by it. And it's gone so far that this inner demon has just defeated them, right? So we have to, if we identify that we're all tormented by that same enemy and we learn constructive ways of dealing with it for ourselves, we can start to be a light to others. So even again, if you see somebody who's losing the fight, know that you have that same fight that you're fighting. Maybe not against the same thing and maybe not to the same degree, but we all are, this is a universal thing. We all have these internal pleasures, these internal impulses that pull us. And some people make it out and some people don't, but know that could be you tomorrow, right? Because you have the same makeup that the very things could happen to. So we don't want to judge others, right? We want to see our own impulses, our own pulls, try to correct them so that we can be a light to others. So in future verses, Krishna will talk about how our knowledge acquiring apparatus, how this body gets sabotaged. And that's when what is meant for our protection seems like a restriction or deprivation, right? And he'll talk about the role of intelligence and how it's extremely important in combating or curbing this unbounded desire. Now, this out of control craving in the mind is referred to as the enemy in this world. Oftentimes we think that our enemies are external, but the Gita, so beautiful about the Gita, it points us, it tells us that no, your biggest enemy is internal. And with that, it's so empowering, right? Oftentimes we can be kind of triggered by external things and we think that that's the problem. like somebody does something in politics and we think that, and we're so triggered by it. And we think that it's their problem. If they were changing, what's going on, I wouldn't be triggered by that. And that might be true to some degree, but really the problem exists inside of us, right? Maybe it's unearthing an insecurity inside of us that we haven't completely dealt with that is extremely triggering and kind of brings up this like fight or flight mechanism within us externally. But we should understand that even if that situation went away, there'd be another situation that would trigger that very insecurity. And therefore, the only way to really cure or heal that what you're feeling is to address that, right? And we address it here with this spiritual wisdom. And you can apply this spiritual wisdom on any level, and you'll feel some kind of elevation. But this basic understanding that we're not the soul, we're not the body, and these material identifications are temporary, right? Whatever they are, whatever material identifications that we have, or impulses that we experience, or even bad behaviors, this is all just part of this karmic package. It's not us, and there's always hope. We can always improve ourselves. You're never too sick to take the medicine. We can always clarify our understanding, and that's why we're here, right? So this out of control craving in the mind is referred to as the enemy in this world, and we're in a perpetual state of warfare. So if we knew that someone was out to get us, right? If we knew that we had an enemy out there, we would have to be constantly alert. That's just natural how we would be. But we should understand that these enemies exist inside of us, right? There's cravings that are out to destroy us. And we should understand that we have to have a certain degree of alertness. We have to know that it's coming and be able to identify with those triggers or those signs that there's potential there. And again, it's different for everybody. Like some people, can drink socially and it's no problem. Some people can drink socially and see that over time they're starting to lean more and more as a crutch on that as a crutch, maybe to feel like socially more empowered or to mask some kind of like hardship that they're going through. And that's a sign. That's a sign that, okay, this could devour me pretty quickly and it's time to turn around, right? So we have to kind of be in tune with that. What are we using in our lives as a crutch? What are we using to mask our insecurities, right? What are we using to feel more confident and empowered that could potentially devour us? And this is why we turn to spirit, because it can solve all these problems for us, but it only gets higher. It never takes you lower. It only takes you higher. And material existence is the opposite, right? Anything that we use to mask, even if it's positive, even if it's like quote unquote positive, like working out, like people think working out's great, and it is great in a lot of ways. But even something like that, if you overdo it, it can be detrimental to you. It can hurt yourself. You can hurt yourself. You can hurt others. You can use it as a way to escape things that you actually need to confront, right? And all of these things that we use, they can turn into this. Relationship with source never can. And that's why it's the best. That's the only way out. Okay. Okay, so here now we're getting to like the gold of the class, and this is like what's going to tie everything together. This is probably like my favorite part. Actually, does anybody want to share anything before we move to this part? It's all been, oh yes, please, Maria.
Yeah, I the past like 4 or 5 years, I've had all kind of things going on, but none of them really affected me because I just felt this bliss of the transcendental energy. But the last day or two, I had so many things happen that I've been really getting pulled down. And what happened is, I work as a caregiver to a woman. She's my age, but she's intellectually challenged since birth. So she's emotionally and intellectually like a 3 year old. And she just drops everything in her place. And she has an inspection tomorrow, and I need to get her place in shape. So it was really important for me to get there today to get her place exactly the way it's needed and convince her to keep it that way till the next day. And I got a tack in my tire yesterday, and I've been working really hard to get it fixed. But my nephew put a spare on, and I think that I can get down there to her place in Oakmont, which is like about 40 minutes from where I am. But I'm so scared that I'm not going to get there to get her place ready. And I know I can't control everything. Krishna's in charge. I'm crazed right now.
Mm.
Sorry.
No, this is good though. This this is good because it reveals where our attachments are. What our attachments, even like what we're making it mean about ourselves or what kind of position we're trying to take as the controller. And we see, like you said, that how much more we need to rely on source and trust in God's plan and understand that that we're not the controller. I sent I sent Veda a picture of my daughter sleeping. It was so cute this morning. It was like the cutest picture. Maybe I'll post it on the thread. It was so cute. We were just talking about something else, and I just got this. My husband sent this to me, and then I sent it, and then I just forwarded it to him. And he said, "This is so good for you. This will make you more human." He said, "Material attachments are a real thing, and they are a real thing. They're a real thing, and they pull us in every which direction, and it's very confronting for us. It's very confronting, but we're blessed to have this work in this life because we see where we're relying more on ourselves, on our intellect, on whatever it is, instead of relying on source, instead of trusting in that plan, and where we're trapped in our ego, making it about ourselves as well, getting lost in that. Yeah. I'm sorry you're going through that. It's real. It's not like it's not real, but it's also an opportunity. And we're all there with you. Mariah, please share.
Yeah. Um, Something that's coming up for me with all of this is recognizing how I've had this pattern where I saw so many people become like enraged through their pain. And I developed a different pattern, which is like really actually kind of difficult to deal with for me, where instead of becoming like angry or enraged, uh, I've definitely, I mean, I've had my times in my life where I've resorted to taking shelter of like marijuana to like numb it and become docile. But now instead of like using anything, I tend to oversleep. But I mean, I even did that as a teenager, like before I ever even like experimented with anything. So like I never got into like drinking, like you said, I never got into that kind of stuff. I never really got overly like enraged, but I would like just slump so far into ignorance where I would just sleep for hours. I mean, I can sleep like 12, 14 hours sometimes. It's ridiculous. And I'm recognized like this class is like I'm really connecting it to like an underlying anger and attachment and pain of just different things I've been through in life. And I don't know, it's almost harder to recognize that because it's like you think it's just the body, but really it's like an emotional thing for me. Like I'm seeing how it's like an emotional thing. And I don't know, I guess I'm just curious if like, in Gita it talks about this lust becomes this over consuming rage, but it's like I've turned it into more of like an over consuming ignorance of just like
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna avoid everything and just oversleep and um yeah, I don't know.
So
I'm
you've
not really
almost
looking
like,
for an answer, but just reflecting on that.
yeah, you've almost like shut it out.
Yeah, I like
I,
numb it to ignore it and avoid it.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of like in psychology, you have like the way of dealing with things. It's like the inhale and the exhale. Like the exhale will like could just completely go crazy on the other person and yell and be upset, and the inhale will like just completely shut down and be withdrawn, and really they're both kind of experiencing the same thing underneath, but they're dealing with it. Their symptom of what they're experiencing is looks completely different, but it's
Yeah.
actually what they're experiencing internally is. So you may be more angry on the inside, but the way that it's manifesting is not an addiction or yelling, or you may not even feel it, but your body's shutting down to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And only within
that's
the
like,
past couple years have I like given myself permission to feel my anger. Like,
mm,
and so that's been like a huge revelation for me. But this is even like connecting it even more. Like I started to realize, okay, I do have anger. Like I avoided it. Like I was like, I'm above it. I don't have anger. I just have sadness. But
yeah.
no, really, it's anger that I turn into sadness because I don't let myself feel that. Um, and so only recently have I been like, okay, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to like have this anger. And I've read this book, The Language of Emotions, and connecting it like anger with boundaries and other things it connects with. That's the biggest one is our anger teaches us where we need to hold boundaries.
Mm,
And so I'm like recognizing that, but yeah, and still learning how to like express the anger in a healthily way and not just like want to just sleep and avoid, like
mm.
so yeah, I don't know. It's interesting that I'm just recognizing that in myself. And I appreciate this space for helping bring deeper realizations to that.
Yeah, I could totally relate to that, by the way. I think I numbed myself out so hard that I like didn't even realize how I felt about things.
Yeah.
And then when I let myself feel, I almost felt like a child.
Yeah.
I almost felt like super immature in being able to actually handle things, because the way I just always handled them was numbing out, that then it was like, oh, now I'm feeling this. I don't really even know how to handle this externally. So it's like kind of, yeah, relearning. A psychologist would tell you that it's more dangerous to be that inhale than the exhale, because the inhale, it's like, where can you go? It's like, what can you work with? It's like it's just completely shut down. Like you don't even, but at least if a person's like screaming or acting out, there's some kind of place to start. Like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I remember my mom talking about that in a different way. And yeah, I remember learning like, okay, it's okay to feel. And I remember I was like, I remember feeling that same way of like being like a child because I remember I started to actually open up and talk to my mom. She was like the first person I started to open up and actually talk to. And I was like, man, this is coming out really immaturely and really messily, but I just have to let it out. And thank God my mom is who she is and has been through enough counseling. She was like, hey, it's okay that it's messy. I'm so glad you're talking to me, And I was like,
mm.
oh, okay. This is at the age of like 29. So it's just like, but
Oh, you're lucky it was your mom. I did it when I first started like when I started dating after a long relationship, and I was like, oh my gosh, it was like egg in the face constantly. So that's nice. You had a soft place to land.
yeah, yeah. But so yeah, I'm definitely like learning to express it more, but yeah, I still see the tendency of wanting to like avoid and oversleep or whatever. But anyways, that's all.
We're all there. We all have this. It's nice. It's wonderful that you can recognize where it manifests. Lakshmi, please share with us.
Yeah, I when I was a teenager, I was the fat kid from the beginning. So, and I was in India at that time. And in India, girls are very slim those days, not now. So I was the only fat girl in the class. So I was bullied so much by the boys and girls, everybody. I was bullied so much. And I used to be like, my heart was like burning. And I couldn't fight back with them, say anything. And I used to come home and eat a plate full of sweets or a big bar of chocolate and then sleep, cover myself, like pretending that I am not in this world. And that is how I used to like escape from that stimulus. And that did not really help me much, because that eating and then sedentary life, that made me gain more pounds. And it was like a vicious circle to me. And my mother tried to help me. My parents were really supportive, and that is the only how I can survived my childhood. So just I wanted to share that, yeah, this kind of escape mentality was there. And sometimes it even triggers now also. And now I know where to go and what to do. And I'm just seeking shelter of Krishna. Krishna, please let me not go that way. That's how entire my life was a struggle. Thank you for listening. Hare
Wow.
Krishna.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Lakshmi's one of these people that just has like a heart of complete gold. You feel so like nourished and loved in her presence. It like breaks my heart to hear that you experienced something like that. But it's wonderful to see again how we mask this anger and how it manifests into different things, and how the Gita's wisdom can really help us also get out of the root cause of it. And also loving relationships like you had with your parents, or it's wonderful. Thank you. Karina, please share with us.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, I was thinking about what you said a few minutes ago. That's just the way I am. I feel I used to say that a lot, and you use it as an excuse. You know, if someone doesn't like how you react to something, or you're saying, I can't do this because this is just the way I am. And I think it was like a Gita talk, maybe it was when I was on a pilgrimage, some teacher that said the greatest capacity of the human mind is its ability to change. And that just really impacted me so much. So every time I heard myself saying, but that's just the way, I never stopped myself. And now as a yoga teacher, when we're having especially like teacher training and things get a bit deeper, if someone says something like that, we have a discussion on how we can change that mindset a little bit. And there's another quick point. There's a great book, because I sometimes teach yin yoga, which is the deeper, slower. And it speaks about how we all have these yin, sort of sleepier qualities, and we all have like the over exercising, the youngster type of activities. And getting to Mariah's point about just wanting to go to bed, pull the covers over your head for a bit longer, it says something like, when you come across challenging situations or times in your life, study if you suddenly become a yinster or a youngster, and try to get in the middle of that. And, you know, obviously we need to keep that sort of, we're trying to always balance the yin and the yang, the light and the dark. And it's, I mean, you're already doing it, right, Mariah? You're noticing those things. So then the next step is, how can I add a little yang to that? How can I get out of bed? And that's the difficult part. But that statement, I keep going back to, the greatest ability of the human is the ability to change your mind. And if we keep saying, but this is the way I am, and this is how I react, it's that wheel. We just have to step off the wheel sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really such like an ignorant statement too, right? Because it's like saying these impressions, all these things that have happened to me are who I am. Like they've shaped my mind, my perspective to this perspective, and that's what it is. That's who I am. But really, if we understood that those impressions have been constantly evolving and changing, and then we would that they are in themselves temporary and dynamic, and we could see that we actually have more control over them or power over them than we think. It's not who we are at all. It's like our default mode. Saying who we are, it's really saying like this is who I want to be, or like I've given up. Like this is my statement of defeat. Yeah. But we all do it. We all do it because it's honestly it's the easy way out. And we like the easy way out because it's easy and it feels good. So it's normal. but we now we know, now we know, and we could try to be a little bit better than the decisions that we made yesterday, or. Okay, so now I'm getting to this part where we're going to tie all of this together. We've been super practical up to this point, and we're going to tie it back into the spiritual perspective and wisdom. So the highest aspiration of the heart is to love and be loved. That's like the highest aspiration of the heart. And this love is intended to be in relationship with God. When we come into contact with the material world, this eternal love for God is transformed into lust and then into anger. And from there, we are under illusion, which makes us continue into this material existence. Right? So we almost like mistake this love in our hearts is supposed to be for God. When it comes into contact with something in the material world, a house or, some kind of material attachment, it turns into lust, like this huge desire. And then if we can't have it, it quickly turns into anger. And then this anger can pull us down into this mode of ignorance, into this place of illusion. And this very illusion is what keeps us tethered to this material existence, because we get so caught up in it. It's so devouring, it consumes us, right? So anger is this manifestation of the mode of ignorance. Desire, lust is this manifestation of the mode of passion. And this is like the recipe and the process that we get pulled back into this material existence, right? So if the mode of passion is elevated to the mode of goodness by the methods we talked about of living and acting, we will kind of protect ourselves from being pulled down into the mode of ignorance. Because in this material existence, we have partial independence, right? This partial independence, that means that we're spiritual souls living within material nature. We're governed by both material and spiritual laws, right? So the partial independence allows us to make choices, but within the framework of the material world and the divine will, right? So we're limited by material nature, karma, and divine will. Within that kind of framework, we have choice, like a child who can make choices, but still depends on their parents for safety and guidance and provision. They still live in their parents' house. They still have these rules that govern it, but they can make their own decisions within that house. Right? Similarly, the soul has free will to choose its actions, like the child, but it remains dependent on God's laws and the material world, like the parents' framework, right? So we misuse this independence when our service attitude, again, the natural propensity of the soul to serve and to love God, to serve God, when our service attitude is transformed into the propensity to enjoy for ourselves, right? We're under this illusion that we're the center, that we're God, and it gets transformed in this propensity to enjoy for ourselves. And we come under this sway of lust, we want to enjoy. We under this illusion that we're the center, we're God, we want to enjoy, and we have all these desires popping up, and we're just pulled into this lust. And if we don't have boundaries, they become bigger and bigger. And then we become angry when we naturally can't have them, right? And this is the entire process of the material creation, right? It gives facility to the conditioned soul to fulfill their lustful propensities. So it says, okay, if you have this love for God, you can use it however you want. You're going to be in this material existence. If you want to become confused and disillusioned, you can, this love can be transformed into lust for material things around you. But understand that that's exactly what it is, and that this is the process. This is what's going to happen when that happens, right? But that's the free will that God gives us. This is how much God loves us, to give us this free will, this facility to fulfill our lustful desires. And then when we're completely baffled by all of it, we begin to inquire about our real position. When we play it as hard as we can, we have all these desires that get fulfilled or they don't. We get frustrated, we get angry, we get into this mode of ignorance. We start thinking there must be something more than this. I have this heart full of love. I've given everything I have to, this thing, this relationship, this substance, this, job. And I'm so empty inside. I'm so empty inside. And maybe I'm even lower than that. Maybe it's not just empty. Maybe I'm addicted, and I'm controlled, and I'm defeated. right? And this is where our spiritual life starts when we get to this place. For many of us, this is where our spiritual life starts. God is the source of everything, including lust. He's the source of everything. So if we can transform our lust into love for God, then both the lust and the anger can be spiritualized. And it's like in the Ramayana when Hanuman, this like monkey guy, he was a great servant of Lord Ram. Ram was God. And he showed his anger by burning the city of Ravana, who's like this evil person. And by doing so, he became the greatest devotee of the Lord, right? So he was so angry, but he channeled that into protecting the Lord, right? So similarly, the Lord encourages Arjuna to engage his anger upon his enemies for the satisfaction of the Lord. So if we can spiritualize these things, we can get out of this material matrix. And if love and anger can be employed in Krishna consciousness, they can become our friends instead of our enemies. This is the recipe. This is the process. So that we can get to this transcendental plane. And it's significant that Krishna is speaking this on a battlefield to Arjuna. And he's saying, this is your enemy, right? He's not saying, look across the battlefield, this is your enemy. No, that's not what he's saying. He's saying, this is your enemy, this internal lust, this internal attachment, right? That's impeding you from doing your duty, from staying committed to your higher purpose, from serving me. This is your enemy, right? Not everybody across from you. And he's emphasizing that the inner war is the bigger war and is escapable, right? If we spend a fraction of the thought and energy on inner wars that we spend on these outer wars against external adversities, we can all be much safer, wiser, and happy. And so it's a very sobering verse that points out the danger of self-destructive desire. And that's where we are today. That's the class for today. Does anybody want to share any last thing before we end for the day? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming and for sharing. It's been a pleasure, and I'll see you all on Thursday.